Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you guys here with us today, and in case you missed the first one, I have an awesome guest that is back for part 2. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. So this is Miss Stina Borth. So Stina, thank you so much for joining me again today. And again, if you guys have not caught the first episode, you need to go listen to it. It is live. This is part 2. So Stina, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited for this part too. I felt like we got to just that peak and then I want to keep going.
We literally ran out of time. I need to be able to have her episode to be able to go on the radio, and we were almost out of time. So we literally had to cut it off, but it was so much fun. So as we kind of get into part 2, Stina, do us all a favor then and reintroduce yourself to the guests. Tell everybody who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into your space.
Yeah. So I'm Stina Borth with Keymaker Services. And what we do is we consult, we train, we come alongside and partner with companies that are looking to increase their productivity and inclusion, but through neurodiversity. So if we don't know what neurodiversity is, you're going to love this, because neurodiversity is basically saying that we all have nervous systems, there's diversity in it, and the neuro-inclusion piece is let's include that in our decisions and how we engage with each other and how we do work. So it's working smarter, not harder, and really working with our systems and our cognitive abilities that are our strengths.
And I love that. And that's such a simple answer, because I think that we tend to overcomplicate what something can mean, or if we think that we may have something, you go on Google and you're like, I'm going to die of cancer now, right? And it has nothing to do with I am like, my husband is notorious for it, and it's hilarious because we go over it every time and we always giggle because he's like, I'm going to lose my left leg. But anyway, so I love that you simplify it down that way, because really it does come down to everybody has a nervous system. Everybody's nervous system functions a little bit differently, and being able to understand that, accept that both for yourself and for other people, makes the whole world go round 10 times smoother. And it also opens up your mindset to understand why somebody may be coming at you a specific way or having a conversation a specific way. And I think that it really also allows us to kind of take ownership of what is actually ours and what is actually somebody else's, and being able to really kind of understand that in a simplified way without overcomplicating it just makes things so much easier. And it allows us to be in more of control, which everybody is wanting, right? More in control of how we handle ourselves, how we perceive ourselves to other, how we react to certain things. It's so funny. I actually literally just had this conversation with my 16-year-old because he's like, I'm in control. And I'm like, but you're not if you're suppressing it. That's not control. That's trying to pretend it doesn't exist. Control means you let it come up. You feel it, you understand it, you learn from it, you ask questions, and then you can bring yourself down to whatever state it is that you need to be in at that time. That is ultimate control. And that took me a really long time to understand that as well. So for all of our listeners out there that may have not heard part one just yet, would you like to give them a little bit more insight or information in the word neurodiversity? Because I know that that is a huge one that seems to be thrown out all over the place. There's a lot of people that are being diagnosed with it as well. And you and I kind of talked about this off screen, that like we need to remember it's not a label. It's just how your brain does something. So, for anybody that's out there, whether it is anxiety, it's PTSD, it's neurodiversity, it's ADHD, whatever it is, like, don't let that be what defines everything that you do in life. Like, yes, it lets you know what a part of you is and how you can learn to handle it, but it's not a label that you just put across the thing like a piece of caution tape and go, well, that's it. This is what I am. I don't know how to deal with it. And this is, I can't do it. Right. Like, it's not a throw your hands up moment. I really want people, Stina and I both really want people to understand that it's not about that. So like, yes, we all have some shit. I'm just saying, right? Like, all of us, you guys know, I've talked about this a lot too, but it's not who we are. It just means that we actually got a piece of us to be like, oh, okay. So then how do I function with that? Now you get to learn about yourself, which I promise you, when you go at it from that perspective, it makes life 10 times easier to figure out who you are.
Yeah. And before I jump right into that, I just want to like ping what you were, when you were sharing about it, what came to mind is like awareness. So being aware of how your nervous system is functioning. And by the way, awareness is the number one characteristic of successful leaders and the most successful relationships, right? Whether it's in work or personal, it's across the board. And then it's also about making those agreements. So like, if I know how my nervous system works and I know what I need to be able to process information, like really hear you and meet you and be able to communicate. And I can tell that to you because now I have the language, I have the awareness of my neurodiversity within me. I'm going to be able to perform, whether that's within a personal relationship, a partnership, parent, child, or within a leadership position with someone that you are really trying, or your whole team or your colleague. So it's very transferable. And then I love like what you're talking about, how we all have our shit. We do. We do. And I like using the phrase like, here are your cards. Now we got to learn how to play them strategically. You don't just throw them out, right? It's not pickup. It's actually, you're trying to play through in a way that's going to result in the best outcome. So you keep working it, and brings to mind my favorite word, yet. So if you're not able to do it yet, keep developing those skills. And so within neurodiversity, it's that overarching term that says that we all have nervous systems, and there's diversity within our nervous systems. So that means that my nervous system is functioning different than yours, different than the person that I'm sitting next to, than the one that's standing in line at the grocery store, but they are all interacting. So we know that that is a given. Neurodiversity is a given in the human population. Then we have two polar ends of that neurodiversity. We have neurodivergent, and that's the end that we are using to talk about those that have, a lot of times there's a diagnosis on this end too. So we have like ADHD, autism, OCD, synesthesia, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and the list goes on and on and on. And so we're saying that there is a makeup in the nervous system that is different enough to recognize that what we're saying is neurotypical of the entire population. Now we have to be careful, because with neurotypical, a lot of times folks that are identifying as neurotypical, they just haven't had the awareness yet, or they're not interested in that. So neurotypical is, and I say this every time I talk about it, like, it's really hard for me to sit in that neurotypical range, because I go, that really sounds like normal. And I think there's a lot of danger in that, but I think we also need to have a comparison. What's the setting on the dryer? I love that phrase. I heard that like a few years ago, and I said, yes, that's exactly it. But a lot of us in the population are also in that in between. So maybe we're not neurodivergent, where we have this huge list of, not huge, but like a list enough to be diagnosed based on the current criteria. And mind you, the criteria does change, right? But we still experience several. So like maybe there's 6 over here in neurodivergent, and there maybe is 3 in someone that's not quite to that neurodivergent label. but they still have a nervous system and they still have need for maintenance of their nervous system. We all need to, because if we don't maintain our nervous system, we don't function. We can't think. We can't walk around. We get dysregulated. We've all heard about fight or freeze. These are all things that are at play in our day to day. So that was a lot of words. We have neurodiversity, overarching. That's the concept that there's differences and diversity within our nervous system. Neurodivergent is one polar end, and then neurotypical. And then we talk about neuro-inclusion. Neuro-inclusion is where we say, I'm going to include this knowledge of the nervous system and the exploration of what works for me so that I have awareness and become aware of those around me in my decisions and how I interact with others, how I do work, how I pursue and develop relationships. I'm including that in my thought.
I love that. And that's such a simplified breakdown because again, you can go on Google and you can look it all up and it's going to give you 10,000 things and all information. I know I've even looked at it before when I first heard the word and I was like, what does this mean? And I was like, nope, that did not help me at all. So I love that you break this down in such a simplified form and for people to understand. And I love that you said the awareness because, that's something that I talk about a lot, right? We all go through crap and we all deal with things, whatever it is, both business, personal, within yourself, with others. Yeah. When you decide this is a cycle, this is a pattern, there's something going on, I don't like it, then that's when you can make the decision of, okay, where do I want to go? What do I want to do to learn about it, figure it out, or talk with someone to see if it is something else that's going on versus continually blaming yourself of like, I'm just screwed up. I can never do anything right. I've been a failure since I was a kid. Like those are limiting beliefs that are all bullcrap. To anybody out there, I know if you're having those thoughts, I promise you I've been there. I thought I was a horrible, absolute trash mother for the longest time because of what my kids went through. That's just a limiting belief you put on yourself because it scares you too much to actually ask the question of what the hell is actually going on. And I think a lot of us fall in that in-between space. So, as we're moving into this conversation, then what happens when you have that awareness and you decide like, okay, something's off. Something's different. I'm not functioning like these people tell me. Every time somebody tells me to do it this way, I have to change it. It has to be done differently. Yeah. What is the next step? Or for those that have taken that step and they find out that like, I do have ADHD. I am on the scale of autism. I have been diagnosed as neurodivergent. What do you do then? Because I know that a lot of people, again, they see it as a label. And when they see it as a label, they immediately go, great, nobody's going to understand me now. Like, what am I going to do now? How do I do this? How do I medicate it? What is the easiest way to take care of it so I don't have to think about it? And you have to continue to want to be in that awareness. And that is something that a lot of people know that I preach to my clients on my podcast and all the things. So fill us in because I know that this is something you dealt with as well, which is why I love that you now help people with this too. What happens when you find that awareness and you make the call to figure it out, and then you are slapped with this label in the face?
Well, it's a big wave. And there's a couple of them that come. But yeah, I mean, what happens is when you say, I'm going to step into this awareness, that is scary. That is a lot. And that is an intentional choice. It also is a very powerful choice because with awareness, we know that now we have more data. And with more data, you can make better decisions for yourself, for those that you are influencing, that you have contact with, whether it's work or at home. What's really hard, and this has happened to me, is that when you are an adult, you're already in your career, and then you discover, I fit into this neurodivergent piece. And I was over here in neurotypical. I was typical. I'm normal. I'm with everybody else. Now I have this label and you go, I don't know if I want it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to do. There's a lot of like unknown. And so whenever I become aware of somebody else going through this initial moment, I remember all of the grief that I felt, the anger, the fear, the like real confusion, like how does this change? And what's interesting is that I'm the same person. I was the same person. I just needed to lean into and discover, what can I use this information to better my situation, to level up my skills, to communicate more. And so when I hear of that, and I have a great story that I'm going to go into, but when I hear of that, I always want to hold that space and just normalize. You know, it's okay that you're feeling all of this now. And there are steps that you can take to move forward, and that you're going to find that it's even better that you have this info. And then also, side note, like disclosure is a totally different topic. There is that you can choose whether to disclose that label or not. I always suggest is you talk about your experience, what works for you, what you are doing for yourself, and then if you have requests for whether it's an accommodation or such as processing auditory information. If somebody's talking at you, giving you lots of steps, you go, whoa, I'm not going to retain that. It's really easy for you to say like, hey, can you text that to me? Nobody thinks that's weird.
Yeah.
It's just a request of like taking in that information. So you now know that that's easier for you to process that information. It's a really easy piece to integrate. So I would say, if you get that diagnosis, the next step is find out what your resources are. So like if you're in a career, go to your HR. Do they have a neurodiversity initiative? Do they have support services? Are there accommodations that you want to request from your job, from your leader? Or can you self-accommodate? There's a lot of those that you can self-accommodate. I do that all the time. You know, I have a standing desk. I use one of these discs all the time. So I can get some movement and some stimulus. I manage my work environment so that I know what's coming in, what's coming out to maintain my focus. So it's about educating yourself in all of those things. And a lot of times that means you're going to seek out someone like myself. You could go to therapy. You could talk to the HR. And I would also say, seek out other communities of adults that are in our neurodivergent community.
I love that. And I love that, you said once you figure it out, like it's almost like the greatest gift ever, because it's like a complete discovery of like, oh, that's why I do that. I laugh now when I notice certain things and I'm like, oh, I know I do that now. Like, it's so funny to me. But I love that you bring it as a sense of awareness. And then it's like, okay, so now where are the tools? What are the resources and what can you learn from it? And I think the biggest thing, and I want to repeat this in case somebody missed it or needs to hear it again, you get to choose to disclose that information or not. And I love that so much, because I do feel like we live in a society where people expect us to tell everything, but then not tell anything. And then we feel like, well, if I don't tell them what's wrong with me, FYI, it's nothing wrong with you, then they're not going to understand. Yep. Whereas there are so many ways to handle situations and people, or the way you intake information, where you're right. It's just like, oh, hey, that's actually not going to work for me. I'm not going to retain that information. Can you do it this way? Right. And it doesn't mean that you have to be, especially if it makes you uncomfortable. I think that's the bigger thing, right? If it makes you uncomfortable, if you haven't really figured it out yet, if you're not ready to stand in that power of owning who you are, it's really uncomfortable to be like, hey, yeah, I don't know that stuff and I can't understand it because I have this, this, and this. Like that sucks, right? And it's scary. If that's going to shut you down, if that is going to cause you to feel bad about who you are, then don't do it. Like, learn more about yourself first and understand it. Like, you guys, this is why I love Stina. She stands in her power. She's freaking fantastic. She owns her shit. And this is what she talks about. And being able to then have that conversation comes out a lot differently, right? Because then I feel like even when you are having a conversation, if you do need to tell people something, it comes out very differently. I'll give you an example. When I used to first share my story of being in an abusive relationship, and I decided that like more people needed to know about it, it was more of like, yeah, I was I mean, I was in an abusive relationship, but it wasn't as bad as some people's, right? Like it was fine. I kept brushing it off. I wanted to bring it up, but I kept brushing it off because I still felt bad about it. Whereas now when I talk about it, I lead with that. And I've had so many people that I catch off guard because I'm like, yeah, I was in an abusive relationship for 10 years. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh no, I learned from it. I'm like, the emotional and psychological abuse that I went through taught me so much. And now I get to give those gifts to my kids who are now 20 and 16. You don't understand how I get to change their lives because I was put in a situation that made me really look inside to me. And I wouldn't have done that. Am I glad that I went through it? I mean, not necessarily. Nobody wants to go through crap, but did I learn a lot from it? Yes. But there's a huge difference in the way that you communicate that. And that in itself can really affect how the person that you're telling takes that information in, and whether they immediately feel sorry for you and just don't know what to do for you. So they just kind of push you to the side, or they're like, oh, okay, cool. So what can I do for you? Because they already know that you understand what you're doing with. And so they recognize that you're probably going to already tell them like, yeah, this is what's going on. And actually, this is how I prefer to be handled, right? Like there's a difference in that level. And I love that you bring that to the table, which, you know, I'm all about authenticity and like really leaning into who you are, but it takes a little bit to get there. And so I love that you said that you get to choose to disclose that information or not. And if you are not comfortable, what tools can you figure out that you can use, that you can work with, and then worry about disclosing that information later if you feel the need to, or if you need the additional support. So anyway, I will let you take it away because I'm really interested to hear this story as well.
Because it's also, it's like, it's okay if you're in your process of not being ready to disclose either. And sometimes you need to decide, is it beneficial or not? Because you're also, you're relying on that other person's understanding of what you're sharing and their experiences too. And what's really hard, and this stems into how things are shifting in the workplace, which is wonderful. And there's still a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about disclosure, about sharing and you know, othering oneself. And what's really, really important, I think, for companies, organizations, whether it's small, medium, or large, to remember is that we don't need disclosure to be inclusive. We just don't. We can be inclusive in our practices without having a certain number, which, by the way, the number is large because we know in the general population it's 20%, and that's what the pond you're pulling your employees from. So if you take 20% of your employee list, that's a lot. That's a huge number. Yeah. And that's just the ones that are already disclosed. And many of us are in between. So this story that came up, and actually, it was like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks. It was very recent. And it really hit me is that there was this, I had been talking to a contact of mine, and I had been looking at lately these companies that I thought, you know, these are ones that I could help. I'd really like to start doing work in this. And so I asked for a connection. Can you introduce us? And I got onto this person's calendar. And then when I got to the meeting, this was where the magic happened. I got chills. I was like, whew, universe, divine intervention, something's happening. She told me, and this is someone that was in HR, she told me that right before our meeting, one of the team members, the employees, had just come in and said, hey, I just got this diagnosis, and I know you have services. I'd like to engage in them. And this HR individual had to say, we don't have anything. And she was shocked because then she went and tried to like find, are we sure we don't have this? Because this is a large company, and most of the large companies, I mean, we're talking like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, SAP, Deloitte, Microsoft, all have diversity initiatives started. Now, I don't know that we're really comprehensive yet. This is really new in development, but how disheartening to find somebody actually had the courage to come in, disclose, newly diagnosed, with the expectation of support, to be told, we don't have anything for you. Yeah. Now, thank goodness this leader took it upon herself to go, I'm going to ask about it. And what was really cool is that as she looked at it, she goes, oh, this person that I'm meeting with, this is her specialty. It was like total connection. And so my response immediately was like, oh my goodness, I feel this individual's moment right now. This was flashing me back to years ago. So get my information to her. here's my scheduling, get her on my schedule right now. And I met with her, and what was really wonderful is that I was able to listen and validate and hold that and say, these are all normal. This is a total process that we go through. And by the way, there are steps you can take and it's all going to be okay. Like the biggest fear that came up was how has this impacted my professional performance so far that I wasn't aware? How is it going to impact me in the future? And by the way, I just disclosed. And then what about now I'm seeing all these patterns and going, my relationships. Oh, and it was like this spiral. And I said, you got it. Now you have the first piece. Now let's work on giving you some more education and training of how to play those cards. And so I was able to have that magical moment with this person, which I wish somebody was there for me in that moment. So I made myself into that person that I would want to manifest for myself. And then I also followed up with the company and I said, if you want help developing a program, if you want help providing these services, because of course, through that conversation, it was disclosed there were many more people that were feeling this way that had diagnosed that hadn't disclosed. And I think that is, I know that is the case in a lot of companies.
Yeah.
But was really, really impactful for me. And it was really reaffirming of like, these are the moments and that tell me this is why I'm in this work, this human side. And then all of the work that's led up to this, the past 10, 15 years of figuring out how do you teach and train? Because like what you referred to earlier, you get the diagnosis and you go, okay, a lot of times it's go right for the medication, which is a tool. But skills of managing our nervous system is going to be the most sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
We're not machines. We don't want to be. That's where if we were machines, we wouldn't have any innovation and creativity and connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you got to just like bring all of that together. Like what a cool sign for you to know that like I'm in the right space. Right. Yeah. And be able to have the awareness to that, because I can't tell you how many times, like looking back now and I break down my story, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that was there to help me. I didn't even realize it. You don't accept it in those moments, but when you start to gain this awareness more of like who you are and what is around you, it's crazy how things, not only do they fall in place, which they fall in place a lot of times, we just don't even recognize it. But when you have that awareness, you get to be even more appreciative of it. And I think that also gives us even more drive, right? Because then you're like, oh, yes, that's another big check mark. Like,
yeah, you just put the turbo in, great.
It's fantastic. And you're so right too, because there are so many people, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they've been through abuse, whether they've had childhood trauma, that there's a large portion of our population across the globe that do not disclose that information. And it does take people like you and I to go through it, wish that we had someone that would have been there for us to hold that space, to then create that space for others. Because there's always going to be people that go through those things. It's just going to happen. It's human nature, right? But to have people that can support it, that can give you that space, that really honestly and truly know what on earth you are going through. Like I am not shooting crap up your skirt. I freaking know, like it's a world of difference. And that made a huge difference for me when I first stepped into realizing like codependency and what anxiety was and all these different things. I found someone that actually was able to elaborate on some of the stuff that they had gone through. And that type of connection is really what allowed me to be like, oh, okay, so I'm not weird. It's not just me. There's a lot more people, right? And so I love that you're bringing this to the corporate space as well for people to understand this, because this ultimately is a game changer in one of the most positive ways, right? Like this is how we start to better understand people. This is how we bring back in that human factor instead of trying to act like we're all robots. This is where, like you and I talked about that different level of communication where you step in with curiosity, you ask questions to understand versus attacking and reacting.
Yeah. I mean, you're collecting data. So like asking those questions, pulling it together, creating understanding and awareness. This is all data. So I love you going back and going, I'm not just like asking for the fun of it. I'm asking because I want data to be able to make better decisions, whether it's a relationship connection at home or at work. It also, I think within the corporate and within the organizational world, we have to remember that it's 2-3 pronged. There was a quote out, I was just reading this article, and it was this C-suite exec that said, this is neurodiversity awareness and neuro-inclusion is the only initiative that has really touched so many different parts of our company and in a positive way. And we see that is that as we acknowledge the human side, the relationship-based work, and by the way, if we're in sales, relationship-based sales and business is the most sustainable, is the deepest, and you get the highest level of productivity and performance because we're acknowledging it, because we're including that factor. And so when we look at the stats of neuro-inclusion, neurodiversity awareness initiatives, they're huge. Productivity, the different reports I've read, like it's between 30 and 48% goes up when you do this initiative. I was talking with colleagues that work within this, and they were talking about those that have gone through their initiatives and the retention. So like some of the reports I was reading was more like 34% of retention improvement, but they were telling me it's something in their 90s. Wow, that's incredible. And I also love this is that with a neuro-inclusive mindset and that thought pattern of doing this work of neuro-inclusion, it's a great partner for inclusion of all different types of diversity initiatives, because everybody has a nervous system. So nobody's othered out of this. Everybody's interested in managing their nervous system. Like, I want to be able to drive this amazing vehicle that's in my brain. I want to make it corner like it's on, what was from Pretty Woman? Corner like it's on rails. Yeah. I want to drive it, and I want to drive it really well. And I want to perform at the highest level. We want that for everybody. But in order to do that, we have to be able to have the thought process to get to the place that we are actually including all of the genius within our team, all of the innovation, and that we're not missing out on those leaks that happen when we aren't inclusive. Because when somebody's coming in and masking and they don't feel safe, and we're not addressing the Maslow hierarchy of needs, we're losing a huge part of what we could be benefiting from professionally, business-wise, relationally, because they're having to put that energy somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think that this is a huge stepping stone as well, because it's going to allow people to, again, learn a little bit more about themselves, but I think really kind of pull that ownership back in. And then, like you said, the person that you talked with, not only did they realize like, oh my gosh, this could have already impacted my work. How is it going to impact my career now? Then you said that they started talking about like, this is what I've noticed in my relationships. This is what I'm like, you start to realize these patterns. And I almost feel like if you look at it from a point of, this is a part of me and now I get to understand me versus why is this happening to me? You get to then recognize the things that you've dealt with and been through and go, oh, I can break that now. I can get out of that cycle. I can stop doing that because now I can do something different. And the only way that you can do that is by learning more about yourself and learning about more things around you. Otherwise, you just continue in this circle. And what is it? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So I think that it's a wonderful tool in all aspects of our life, because again, it unlocks, like you say, that key unlocks, the key unlocks another piece of you for you to be like, oh, that's
and
why
you get
I
to
do
be the
that.
key maker. You get to make that key. That's what's really cool. As you're just talking, I was going, you get to be the doer. You're not just the receiver and like the one that's experiencing this is happening to me. You get to now step into the driver's seat and say, I'm going to take these actions and these are these steps. And that's very much in line with me. Like anytime I come across a problem, I love yet. I never believe there's not a solution. I just don't have the solution yet. I don't have the information yet. And so when you get to step into that doer space and you get to be the one that's taking the action. I have this information. Gosh, this is a lot of information. I might want to like loop in somebody like a professional, a coach, a trainer, somebody to help me on this journey, but I get to take those steps forward.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like that's a sense of ownership and confidence that nobody can take away from you. You know, we always talk about leaning into who you are. And that right there is a huge piece of it. Like you said, you get to be in the driver's seat. You get to then make the decisions on how you're going to handle it, the directions that you want to go. And I think that a lot of us are looking for that in our lives. And I know that for some, right, it is easier to just be like, I just want someone to handle it for me. And that is not always going to solve it for you, right? That you're continuing in that cycle. You want to gain control. You want to have the ultimate power over yourself. The more that you can learn and understand you and lean into that, nobody can ever destroy that. Nobody can take that away. No one can pull that card and be like, nope, that's mine now. Like that is yours to own and to walk with.
And I think it just because it made me think of conversations with leadership in businesses too, is the fear is that when we acknowledge, when we have a neurodiversity initiative or we acknowledge that neurodiversity is at play, and oh my goodness, yeah, I love that. And Stina, that's going to be really expensive or really big to do this and support all this. And what's the truth of it is that awareness allows a lot of that to be co-accommodated. So it's also the individual that's doing self-accommodations and the employer now coming together, and we're working together to move forward with more awareness and support to get that higher level of that person, of that skill level, which a lot of times the things that matter are so simple. It's like, I think we talked about it in the last episode. It was about like the time awareness ratio.
Yes.
Understanding how you process time. And it's such a simple but very powerful piece of knowledge that then can be applied by that individual, by that leader, that leads into more productivity of how are we planning out our week? When are you the most productive? What about our month? What are the ebbs and flows of the nervous system and the needs of the work that we're doing together? And like, what are the reinforcers? What gives you that motivation? I love chocolate and coffee. So give me that. Do you know how hard I work for that 3 o'clock cup of coffee? I work really hard for that cup of coffee.
I love that. It's
because I'm hitting 2 o'clock and I'm going, okay, oofta, I am tired, but I've got the coffee coming. If I just finish this one last bit, and I am it's the simple things. And we all have things like that. You probably can think of things that you've loved since childhood that still sources of pleasure.
Oh yeah. Well, chocolate's definitely one of them. That's downstairs. But yeah. Oh, and even for me, it's getting the chance to just go outside and take a break. Right. So it's like, okay, just let me get through this. And then I get to go walk outside and sit in the sun for 15 minutes, which is what I love to do. Like those, that's a huge one for me. But I love the reward system. Like I think that's a great thing for people to have, not beat yourself up, right. But just having little things to look forward to, because it really does help when you have had a really long day or you're doing your best to like, I got one more hour, just one more hour, like having little things to focus on or have that are just treats to yourself. I think is wonderful. I love having a little reward system for certain things. So I do massages once a month because then I get close and I'm like, I have a massage coming up. I'm going to whoop butt this week because I'm going to take this time off and it's going to be amazing.
Yes. And you have that going. I mean, that's an example of, these are all examples of the like more consequence reinforcer rewards. But there's 2 other areas of interventions that work really well from going from like an unwanted experience or behavior or engagement. Like, I'm not completing this report that's been sitting here and I know it's due on Friday and I've had it for 2 weeks, but I'm not doing it yet. I need to have some sort of intervention, self-intervention, to get me to that wanted of I'm going to complete the report. And sometimes it is just the really simple reward. Sometimes it's I need more education on how to do it. Give me a template. It could be asking somebody to, can you do that? Start this with me to get the initiative going. It could also be, I need to change the environment. There's too much stimulus here in the office. I need to go and have a separate space. I need to turn my desk so I'm not facing the window. I need to wear earplugs. Those are the ways that we can control and shift and pivot in order to get our needed and wanted outcome.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you brought that up too, because I am that way. Like I have to have certain things in my environment. If I am overdone, I will light a candle, or I have a Palo Santo stick that I light. There's something about smells. It's very common for me. Look, she got it too. Look, see, great minds think alike. But so things like that are really great for me, just to kind of help, like, okay, you got this. And I'm the same way, like, because part of it being a mom, I'm very hyper aware of all the things going on in my house, right? Even though my kids are old enough to deal with themselves, mom mode still kicks in. So I hear them when they get up. I hear them when they're downstairs. It's summertime right now, so there's more activity in my house, right? So I will tell them, and I actually did this just the other day. I was like, hey, I'm putting my noise canceling headphones on. I have work to do, 3 hours. It needs to be banged out. Like, do not interrupt me. Right. And I put those on so that I can't hear things around me. Now, for me, I get to turn my music down like super low, just so my brain has to try to find the noise, because it will, and it focuses on it. And that works for me. I've had some people like, oh, I just blast it. I'm like, yeah, no, that would drive me crazy. But it's the simple fact that I've learned things that work for me. And so that's what I use now when I know I have to get things done. So I love that you brought that up, because there's so many simple tools that we can use to help us throughout our day. It doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it.
And you're training, you're putting your brain through training. I actually call it brain training. I mean, I have all kinds of fun names of this. Time ratio, brain training, because you're just creating that association too and finding what works. So controlling the auditory stimulus is important. Now, I know some folks can do the words, the lyrics. I'm not one of those. So sometimes I'll hear folks say like, well, we're going to play background music for, I would definitely say, no, let everybody else do their own thing as well. So it's like you're in a co-working space.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that when you're doing that and you're focusing on the task, are you looking around as well? Like, are you scanning visually then, or are you really just zoned right in?
I am like zoned in, as long as it doesn't have lyrics, when it's certain specific things, especially when I'm building and doing operational pieces and people stuff. If it's a little bit lighter things that just need to get done and I just want music to like get me through it, then I can usually have some lyrics and I'll just kind of beat bop as I'm going through it. But it cannot have lyrics if I like need to hone in, but I will like blinders on, flip my phone over so I won't see it light up at all, because that will catch me every time.
Click that focus, turn the focus on.
Yeah, every time. So I will flip my phone over. I've got certain times that it turns off. I still let my kids come through in case they need something, but yeah, I have to, because I know like all of my social media notifications are all completely turned off, because I know that if I open my phone and I see that little dot that says 10 notifications, I have to check, because I hate those little dots being there. So I got last year, I was like, that's it. All notifications from all social media, because that was a huge distraction for me, goes away. I check my social media at lunchtime and I check it in the evening to respond to people, point blank, period. Like, otherwise I try to stay off of it. Now, do I falter sometimes? It happens. It's called distractions, or not wanting to do other things. So therefore, you just pick your phone up for a few minutes, but I recognize that, and it's a lot easier to get back on task.
Right. And what's so cool is that you just threw out that tip. I was just thinking in my head is, we all have that. A lot of us, a lot of us have that. I would love to go to social media type thing. And you just schedule the time. You decide when you're going to do it. If you do a complete starvation diet of it, it's not going to work. The desire is going to be stronger. So just find the time, say, like you said, lunch, and then was it the evening time?
Dinner time.
Dinner time. Yep. And then you just hold it. And then after that time's done, it's done.
Yep, I have that. And then I even have my phone turns off at like 8:00, all notifications, the whole screen goes black, just so I don't want to spend my evening focusing on my phone. I would rather read, be with my kids, or things like that. And so I have to have that turned off, because I know I even catch myself checking. I'm like, the screen is black. But I still do it. Like, it's just habit, but I know at least the screen is black. So I was like, oh, that's right. Never mind. And I can go on about my thing. So I love this so much. Stina, I could just talk to you forever. So as we come to a close, one thing that I ask all of my guests, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice you'd like to leave everybody with?
So I remembered that this is how you close. And so I went back and I wanted to bring up again that last line of the poem that led into the name of my company, Keymaker.
Yes.
And it's about keymakers. And the last line goes, a few see a closed door, try the knob. If it doesn't open, they find a key. If the key doesn't fit, they make one. I love that. And that's just, I think that if we each thought about that each day when we had some sort of problem or maybe we're creating, is that the option is always there to create one.
Oh, I love it. I loved it the last time. I love it again this time. Please, Stina, tell everybody then how they can follow you, find you, be in your world.
So the number one place is going to be on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Stina, Stina, Borth, Borth, or look up Keymaker Services. I'm on all the socials. So Instagram, you can look up the YouTube Keymaker Services. There's website keymakerservices.com, Facebook, but I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So that's going to be the easiest, quickest route.
The easiest, quickest. And of course, we'll have all that information in the show notes for you guys. So it'll be super simple for you guys to find Stina, connect with her, chat with her, be in her world, all the things. So again, Stina, thank you so much for part 2 and coming back.
Yes, part 3 coming.
Ooh, man, this could be such a conversation. So I love it so much. So thank you so much for being here today. And thank you everybody else for joining me. Again, if you've not listened to part 1, go back and find it. It was fantastic. This was just an addition too, because we had way too much fun talking about all this stuff. And it has been something that has come up so much in society, in business, in entrepreneurship, and all the things that we really felt like it was something that we needed to bring to the forefront and make sure that people are aware of. So be sure to share this with somebody. I know that you probably know someone that is struggling, going through some of the same things. So share this all over the place. We want to bring awareness. And don't forget, until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.